This is no longer hidden news. The standard narrative does not answer some very pressing questions.
If I were to give you a blank mushaf, yeah, and tell you to write what is munazzal verbatim from Allah into that mushaf with no human interference, would you write something which corresponds?
It's not an easy answer. It's not an easy yes or no. The standard narrative has holes in it. The standard narrative has holes in it.
We are generally introduced and told that the Quran was transmitted in such a manner that there were thousands of memorizers of the Quran. There were heaps, and there were such a large number of people who had memorized the Quran partially and completely, and then these memorizers had transmitted this memorized Quran to the next generation, and so on and so forth. And such was this large number of memorizers of the first generation in the time of the Prophet that any transmission of error was rendered as secure.
When it comes to evaluating hadith, here we have usually one report about something the Prophet, peace be upon him, said or did or happened in his presence. And that is usually transmitted from one person to another, and the chains of transmission can be counted usually. In the case of the Quran, it was not possible to count. There were so many chains. There were so many people who knew within the community. It was like common knowledge that this is how the Quran is and this is how it is read.
And this quote is taken from one of the classical authorities we have, Al-Dharqani. He stated, "The Quran is the Arabic speech of Allah, which He revealed to Muhammad in wording and meaning, and which has been preserved in the mushafs, and has reached us by mutawatir transmission."
The standard narrative has holes in it.
But on the contrary, we find a Muslim hadith book as highly regarded as the Jami' al-Sahih of Imam Bukhari, presenting two narratives which say that actually there were only 4 memorizers of the Quran who had memorized the Quran in the lifetime of the Prophet. And this is obviously in stark contrast with the claim that there were thousands of memorizers.
In the case of the Quran, it was not possible to count. There were so many chains.
Actually, there were only 4 memorizers of the Quran who had memorized the Quran in the lifetime of the Prophet. It is reported by Anas ibn Malik. He says, "Mata Nabi, walam yajma'il Quran ghayru arba," and then he names those 4 persons: Abu Darda, Mu'az ibn Jabal, Zayd ibn Sabit, Abu Zayd. So it says that these are the 4 people. Only the style is very restrictive. It says, "Lam yajma'il Quran ghayru arba." Only 4 people had memorized the Quran. I'm saying memorized because most of our scholars interpret this narrative, the word jam'a, to connote memorization.
And has reached us by mutawatir transmission.
Actually, there were only 4 memorizers of the Quran who had memorized the Quran in the lifetime of the Prophet.
What is all of this going on here?
The way the Quran is arranged is the way that the Prophet ﷺ left it for us.
Jibreel, the angel Jibreel, taught Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam the order of the chapters. Yes? And Zayd ibn Thabit, he witnessed that, so he also knew the order that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam learned from Jibreel, and also the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught it to other companions.
This standardization comes from the Prophet himself. Even the order of the surahs and the verses.
The standard narrative has holes in it.
When it comes to the order of chapters themselves, some of this seems to have been based on the judgment of or the knowledge of the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him.
The way the Quran is arranged is the way that the Prophet ﷺ left it for us.
Some of this seems to have been based on the judgment of or the knowledge of the companions of the Prophet.
This standardization comes from the Prophet himself. And they collectively, unanimously standardized the text of the Quran which we read today.
The order of the Quran Quranic surahs in Abdullah ibn Masud's codex and of Ubay ibn Ka'b's codex is being displayed before you. And this has been brought to surface by Ibn Nadim's Al-Fahrist and Suyuti's Al-Itqan. And they have displayed this arrangement in their own books and said that this is how the Quran was arranged in the companion codices. Again, this question struck me that if the Quran had a different arrangement in different companions and the Quran of Usman again had a different arrangement, then which is the correct arrangement?
The Prophet ﷺ learned from Jibreel, and also the Prophet ﷺ taught it to other companions.
The Sahaba's codices, for example, codices ascribed to Abdullah ibn Ubay, Abdullah ibn Masud, Ali Radha Ta'ala anhum, all of them differed with each other as they have reported in our history books.
The Prophet ﷺ taught it to other companions.
The Quran had a different arrangement in different companions, and the Quran of Usman again had a different arrangement. Then which is the correct arrangement?
What is all of this going on here?
Allah Bari Ta'ala tells you, God Almighty tells you in the Quran, it is His job to protect it from any type of interpolation, any type of addition or deletion.
Whenever Prophet got a revelation, he repeated it to these scribes. The Prophet personally verified. He was an ummi. How did he verify? Okay, read it now. Ikra bismi rabbikal ladzi khalaq. Correct. So Prophet personally verified when he was alive, whatever was written down of the Quran, whether it was perfect or not.
So all of these differences and these dialects were divinely stipulated. Contrary to what James is trying to suggest, that these were scribal errors or intentional changes. Far from it.
And if you check it with today's Musaf, it is exactly the same. Word to word, letter to letter.
Anyone who has a doubt that any word of the Quran is not format, or the Quran is missing any part, is a disbeliever. Because there is one thing that the Ummah has a general consensus in this regard, which is the Quran fully, from cover to cover, from Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen to Surah An-Nas, Min Al-Jinnati Wan-Nas, is definitely the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyone who doubts a word or even a letter is not a Muslim.
The standard narrative has holes in it.
We have certain scribal errors in the Quran, and this is something which every single scholar acknowledges.
So Prophet personally verified when he was alive, whatever was written down of the Quran, whether it was perfect or not.
Even the earliest versions of the Quran have these scribal errors.
God Almighty tells you in the Quran, it is His job to protect it from any type of interpolation, any type of addition or deletion.
Human scribes over time have been human beings, and as human beings, naturally they were prone to error, and they made many different kinds of errors. These kinds of errors are many.
It is His job to protect it.
As human beings, naturally they were prone to error.
There are numerous examples in which we can see these scribal errors in which an extra va or extra ya or an extra alif is found in these versions of the Quran.
Extra alif, can you believe that? Extra alif. This is just crazy textual criticism. I'm not even going to address that. Extra alif and waw and fa, anyone knows spelling differences, scribal styles may differ, may vary. It's about the contents.
This is verse of Surah An-Naml has extra alif contained in it. The words are لَأُعَذِّبَنَّهُ عَذَابًا شَدِيدًا أَوْ لَأَذْبَحَنَّهُ. As you can see, the underlined word, the alif, which actually succeeds the other alif, is an extra alif, because the word is لَأَذْبَحَنَّهُ. Or if we don't accept this to be a letter which is redundant, then we find this anomaly that this verse or this word would read in a very opposite way.
Extra alif and waw and fa, it's about the content.
We find this anomaly that this verse or this word would read in a very opposite way, and the words would be أَوْ لَا أَذْبَحَنَّهُ. It will be a negative particle instead of presenting the positive picture.
Extra alif and waw and fa, it's about the content.
Similarly, another example is from Surah Al Imran. This is verse 158. And here again we find an extra alif. The words are وَلَئِن مُتُّمْ أَوْ قُتِلْتُمْ لَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُحْشَرُونَ. The first of these alif or the second of these alif is redundant, and it has to be subtracted from reading or deleted from reading. Otherwise, we'll have an opposite meaning.
Extra alif and waw and fa, it's about the content.
La ilallah tuhsharun would mean that it is for sure that people shall be gathered before the Almighty. But if we read it with the second alif as well, then the verse would become La ilallah, and we shall not, people, or you should not be gathered before the Almighty. So you can see there is an exactly opposite meaning.
These kinds of errors are many.
Other than these examples, there are numerous examples in which we can see these scribal errors in which an extra va or extra ya or an extra alif is found in these versions of the Quran. And it is not just the Quran that we have today. Even the earliest versions of the Quran have these scribal errors.
Allah Bari Ta'ala tells you, God Almighty tells you in the Quran, it is His job to protect it from any type of interpolation, any type of addition or deletion.
Well, we know that in Hadith literature there are Hadiths which tell us that the Quran that we have is incomplete. The Rajam verse is a very typical example. It is called Mansukhu Tilawa Dunul Hukum, which means that it is there.
Yeah.
Just the recital has been abrogated. Then we have the suckling verse, which the mother of faithful Aisha said that the Prophet had just died, and they still read that verse in the Quran, and we know that it's no longer in the Quran.
There is only one copy of the Quran, and anyone who has a doubt that any word of the Quran is not from it, or the Quran is missing any part, is a disbeliever.
Surah Falaq and Surah Nas are two very prominent surahs of the Quran. Almost every person whom we know, all of us we learn these surahs by heart. And one of the famous companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, Abdullah ibn Masud, one of the earliest people to accept Islam in the Meccan period, he was the fifth or the sixth person to accept Islam. It is said that he never regarded these surahs to be part of the Quran. He said these are just du'as, these are just prayers, like the prayer of Qunut. As far as these prayers are concerned, they are not part of the Quran. The Quran ends at Surah Ahad, Surah Ikhlas. Surah Falaq and Surah Nas have been wrongly placed as part of the Quran. They are not part of the Quran. That is what he said, and these narratives are found in all our famous Sirah books.
And anyone who has a doubt that any word of the Quran is not from it, or the Quran is missing any part, is a disbeliever.
This is not coming to us from today Orientalists. I mean, they're bringing some factors, but really the bulk of everything is coming from our own sources. It's coming from our books saying, by the way, Hisham ibn Hakim, this is how he read, Umar disagreed, this is what Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said, this is what he said, Ubay said. Our books are saying this.
What is all of this going on here?
The question was, do Muslims also have different versions of the Quran? We have no different versions. So we have no different versions of the Quran. The Arabic Quran universally is the same. No difference between one part of the world and another.
Quran is the only book which has only one version.
But it's the same book,
absolutely.
And there's not different versions.
No different versions.
So anyone comes and says there's different versions of the Quran.
That's a ridiculous claim.
Any Muslim has ever said that? Any scholar has ever said that?
It's as outlandish as it gets, to be honest with you.
That fundamental uniformity is amazing. One Quran, there's no difference. Shia, you go from Indonesia to Morocco, or now from Indonesia to California, they read with the same makharij al-huruf.
There is only one copy of the Quran.
The standard narrative has holes in it.
And confusion arises when we think about that, because many Muslims just simply have the simplistic idea that there has only been one version of the Quran throughout history, and that's the version that we're holding now. And when we read our history, we see, in fact, that there were variations, multiple readings.
So we have no different versions of the Quran. The Arabic Quran universally is the same. No difference between one part of the world and another.
Today, most Muslims read the Quran in a text that is referred to as the Egyptian edition of 1924. But this is not the only text of the Quran that is read throughout the world.
The Arabic Quran universally is the same. No difference between one part of the world and another.
This is not the only text of the Quran that is read throughout the world.
That fundamental uniformity is amazing. One Quran, there's no difference. Shia, you go from Indonesia to Morocco, or now from Indonesia to California, they read with the same makharij al-huruf.
This is not the only text of the Quran that is read throughout the world.
So anyone comes and says there's different versions of the Quran.
That's a ridiculous claim.
Any Muslim has ever said that? Any scholar has ever said that?
It's as outlandish as it gets, to be honest with you.
Currently, there are 5 different versions of the Quran found in the Muslim Ummah.
Quran is the only book which has only one version.
Currently, there are 5 different versions of the Quran. When I say there are 5 versions, it means that there are 5 different versions which have different words at times. There are verbs which are different. There are nouns which are different. There is a difference between plural and singular. There's a difference between declensions or the i'rab. And then we have other differences as well.
Anyone who doubts a word or even a letter is not a Muslim.
When I say different versions, of course, I refer to the fact that the words are different. Then there is this word order at times which is different. Then we have, although these differences might not be very significant as far as their meaning is concerned, although there are some others as well which have a significant change of meaning as well, but still the claim that the Quran was preserved word for word in one format had that claims seem to literally shake in its foundations.
When I say 5 versions, I am not talking about any pronunciation issue or qira'at issue. I am talking about complete set of the Quran, which have different words, different from the Quran that we see in front of us today in the United States and some other parts of the world.
What is all of this going on here?
He allowed them to recite exactly the same thing.
So they're just like, it's kind of like accents.
Absolutely. That's
It's kind of like accents. And Allah has allowed the book to be read in different accents.
Exactly.
They tried to prove these silly things. Oh, there's all these different types of Quran. They've never differed that there were differences of recitation. The Prophet ﷺ taught those differences. Omar got upset when he heard a Quran reciter reciting it one way. He said, that's not the way the Prophet taught. He said, that's the way he taught me. They both went to the Prophet, and the Prophet said, yes, I taught him that way, I taught you that way. So he taught in different dialects.
So the Quran came down in these 7 dialects, and some of these dialects differed in wording. Synonyms were used by different tribes to express certain words in different ways. And these synonyms were accommodated in the copy of Abu Bakr.
The standard narrative has holes in it.
The differences in these versions is not just in matters of pronunciation or or accent.
He allowed them to recite exactly the same thing.
So they're just like, it's kind of like accents.
Absolutely.
The differences in these versions is not just in matters of pronunciation or or accent.
So he taught in different dialects. Warsh, Qalun and Warsh, who are the recensions of Nafi', they recite in the Hijazi dialect. So the language of the Warsh in particular is the language of the Quraysh. Like they said mu'min, they didn't say mu'min. They didn't pronounce the Hamza. Bani Tamim pronounced the Hamza. The Najdi recitation is from Bani Tamim's language. So you have Hafs, they say mu'min.
The differences in these versions is not just in matters of pronunciation or or accent.
Synonyms were used by different tribes to express certain words in different ways. And these synonyms were accommodated in the copy of Abu Bakr.
The differences in these versions is not just in matters of pronunciation or or accent, but it also relates to differences in verb patterns, differences in nouns, different in a singular or plural noun, and similarly in declensions or i'rab. And then there are differences in particles also. For example, at places we'll have waw or a fa.
What is all of this going on here?
What about this? He says in Surah, if we go even further, they go as far as to say that there's 1,600 changes, all of which have a massive effect on the meaning. Yes, go ahead.
Once again, it's quite astonishing, really. The science of the qira'at is one of the greatest evidences for the preservation of the Quran. And yet, by some twisted and perverted methodology, this is actually being used to attack the Quran.
The variations that we find between one recital and another are not such to change anything that Muslims believe, and they're not such to affect Muslim practice in any significant way.
There are as much differences, if you consider the qira'at one different from the other, then you have to consider you aren't and you are not as different meanings. You are not and you aren't. Would you understand me completely differently if I used either of those?
It's just a contracted version.
It's just a different way of saying exactly the same thing.
The standard narrative has holes in it.
May I show you, viewers, that if I show you this Quran before me and I open up any page of the Quran, you'll find on its sides other variant readings of a particular verse which is mentioned in the main text are mentioned in the margins, and you can see that there's hardly a page in this whole corpus of the Quran which is devoid of any variation in this reading.
They go as far as to say that there's 1,600 changes, all of which have a massive effect on the meaning.
There's hardly a page in this whole corpus of the Quran which is devoid of any variation in this reading.
The Quran approximately of this size has about 700 pages, and it is just one page. And you can see that, although it's very minutely written, but if you can come closer, you'll find that this one page has about 20 variations of reading the Quran, 20 variations. And if you multiply it by 700 pages, because you see, an average Quran has so many pages, you can just imagine the amount of variation. You'll find almost every single verse being allowed to be read by our Mufassirun in some other way, because according to them, the Sahaba or the Tabi'un read it in that way as well.
It's just a different way of saying exactly the same thing.
If you ask me that does this difference change the meaning of the Quran as well, I will say yes. In many cases, it does change the meaning, and although the change might be very minor and it might not be of much significance, but again, it does change the meaning, and in some cases, there is a drastic change in meaning as well.
The variations that we find between one recital and another are not such to change anything that Muslims believe, and they're not such to affect Muslim practice in any significant way.
In some cases, there is a drastic change in meaning as well, because when words change, when we find that there is a difference in declensions, in verb patterns, in nouns, the meaning obviously changes.
What is all of this going on here?
And the evidence for this is a hadith narrated in Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Muslim Imam Ahmad, in which the Prophet ﷺ said, Jibreel came to me and recited the Quran in one manner. And he used the Arabic word, one harf. And I recited it back to him. But I asked him to increase the number of harf until he offered me 2, 3, 4, 5, until he said the Quran had been revealed in 7 ahruf, 7 ways of reciting, so all of them are the same in meaning. They do not change the meaning, but they change in pronunciation and in the finer details.
Did the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam recite the Quran with these qira'at that we have today? وَالَّذِي يَظْهَرُ وَالْعِلْمُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. That which seems apparent and clear from the Quran itself and from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and from the statements of the Sahabas and the great Imams is that the Quran and the qira'at that we have, the Prophet ﷺ recited it.
So these are the 7 ahruf. They're exactly 7 ahruf that Allah Azza wa Jal allowed the Quran to be recited in, based upon the dialects, the famous 7 dialects of the Arabian Peninsula.
So it's not a matter of different versions of the Quran?
It's quite ridiculous really when you think about it. It's as if something new was discovered. Or, the Qira'at have been a known and accepted science since the time of the Prophet ﷺ until modern day 21st century.
The standard narrative has holes in it. And by the way, this is now a well-known open secret amongst many Muslim graduate students and academics around the world. And this is well known. Traditional understandings of ahruf and qira'at cannot answer some of these pressing questions that are now being poked.
Now, I don't really buy into that this was the divine way or this was the 7 ahruf which Allah revealed, the hadith that Allah revealed the Quran on 7 ahruf. First of all, that hadith isn't even sahih.
And the evidence for this is a hadith narrated in Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Musnad Imam Ahmad.
That hadith isn't even sahih.
And the evidence for this is a hadith narrated in Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Musnad Imam Ahmad.
And then I've also worked on the isnad of these ahruf narratives and shown that not only the marfu ones, but the mawquf ones, of course the mawquf means the narratives which are reported by the Sahaba, they are not soundly reported.
So this is the origin of the different recitations of the Quran. It all goes back to the Prophet ﷺ asking Jibreel allowance from Allah to recite the Quran in different ways.
All Muslim scholars, they have different opinions regarding this narrative. When it is said that the Quran was revealed on 7 ahruf, we are not in a position to definitely say what this ahruf means and what the word or the letter 7 or the number 7 refers to.
So this is the origin of the different recitations of the Quran. It all goes back to the Prophet ﷺ asking Jibreel allowance from Allah to recite the Quran in different ways.
And there are 15 opinions about this. None of them fully answer all of the questions that are raised.
So this is the origin of the different recitations of the Quran.
We find different opinions, a plethora of opinions, people citing over 30 interpretations of this narrative. And a person of the caliber of Imam Suyuti has said that this narrative is among the mutashabihat, or the meaning of which is only known to God.
So when the revelation of the Quran started upon the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easier for his ummah to memorize the Quran by allowing it to be recited in these various dialects.
This is something that is coming at a later stage, okay? The codification of the qira'at is coming in the 2nd, 3rd century.
And the qira'at that we have, the Prophet ﷺ recited it.
This is something that is coming at a later stage, okay? The codification of the qira'at is coming in the 2nd, 3rd century.
The Qira'at have been a known and accepted science since the time of the Prophet ﷺ until modern day 21st century.
So these are the 7 ahruf. They're exactly 7 ahruf that Allah Azza wa Jal allowed the Quran to be recited in based upon the dialects, the famous 7 dialects of the Arabian Peninsula.
This is nonsense to say that, because it's only with Ibn Mujahid that these 7 became popular. But otherwise, other people had said they were, many more than 7.
The Quran had been revealed in 7 ahruf.
Got Abu Ubaid, who had highlighted, I believe, about 20 different qira'at. Tabari had done a similar thing, about 20 odd different qira'at. You've got other people that have come along that have highlighted up to 50.
The Quran had been revealed in 7 ahruf.
And there are also 10 قراءات.
وهناك 14 قراءة.
And there are also 14 different modes of recitation.
وهناك 120 قراءة.
And there are 120 different types of recitation.
The Quran had been revealed in 7 ahruf.
Abu Bakr ibn Mujahid only selected 7 of them. Before them we have Tabari actually selecting 30 readings. We have Abu Ubaid, Qasim ibn Salam selecting 25.
The issue of ahruf and preservation and qira'at and relationships between them, these are very, very difficult issues. And the most advanced of our scholars, they're not quite fully certain how to solve all of the unanswered questions in there. And it's very clear to you and to every single very advanced student and specialist that the standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say. The standard narrative does not answer some very pressing questions.
And here in our audience, mashallah, we have many huffaz, mashallah, who know the Quran by heart. Even if you burn the copy, you get all the huffaz together, you get together, again the original Quran, word to word, letter to letter can be reproduced.
If I were to give you a blank mushaf, yeah, and tell you to write what is munazzal verbatim from Allah into that mushaf with no human interference, would you write something which corresponds?
It's not an easy answer. The standard narrative has holes in it. The standard narrative has holes in it. The standard narrative has holes.